To see him going so strongly, bearing in mind he's had to miss the last few weekends of the FIA Championship because of a back injury he sustained at Poe a few months ago. Sean Gallile, who knows the circuit, of course, he was here for the FIA rounds. He was here in British F3 last year. He lines up second on the grid. And the Jaguar I Am, the tasty chicken liveried Carlin-run car. And then for third on the grid, although the car is not there yet, it should be Roberto Mehi. John Bryant Meisner here, another man from the FIA Championship for Fortec, driving for Performance Racing, Bobby Esazada's team. And then you go back a road to Sam McLeod, who's had 4 wins this year in the British Championship, that in fairness has struggled on occasions for numbers, but you can only beat the opposition, can't you? Yeah,
and as you can see, as we're going through cycling through the grid, you can see the different shapes of car. That is a pre-2012 machine. As we move on to the next car, you can see a very different nose shape, and in fact even the rear wing fractionally narrower than the latest spec Dallara, and that also means that the cars are better at certain points in the circuit. These are older spec cars, less aerodynamically efficient, but are quite strong still in the twisty stuff. It's down the straights where the power and the aerodynamics really play out.
Looking further back on the grid, we've had a look at the car of Martin Chow. You've got Nabil Jaffrey lining up for the Motor Park Academy squad, and all the way back to the bus stop. The last car on the grid is going to be that of the ADM Motorsport team for Kang Ling. As I say, a number of drivers and teams from the German F3 Cup coming into the series this weekend, and there are moves perhaps for the future to try and align the two rather more closely and have one a good international sub-level FIA championship. Another man at the back of the grid that'll be worth watching, Cameron Kaminski, came out from the forward in the UK last year. Peter Lee, former GT racer and Audi champion, is there in the Volkswagen engine Carlin car. Li Jikong to give him his full title, but he's somebody else that should be able to make progress, having been in the top 3 at Silverstone earlier on in the season. And Carlin remains one of the top teams, of course, in Formula 3, splitting its time in another hectic weekend between here and GP3. It's Formula Renault 3.5 team as well. Looking further back on the grid, there is Cameron Kaminski for Double R, Anthony Hyatt's team. And the last car you just saw in the background, Kang Ling. So the grid is 14 cars this weekend, which is numerically the best that we've had this season, and it backs up the efforts that's being put in to maintain the British Championship. The naysayers say, oh, forget about it because it's struggling for numbers. Another side says you need to work at it, keep going and try and build it back up again, and I think that is starting to pay dividends, which is good to see, because the British Championship, Ben, has this great history, doesn't it? This great heritage.
Well, absolutely, and we've had many a champion from the British Championship over the year progressing to Formula 1, and it's really worth keeping these national championships going, even if they are a support of the European Championship and they run to slightly different specifications, and it sort of creates this natural ladder from national into international. But at one point, the British Championship was the place to prove yourself and prove your craft, and people such as Jean-Eric Verne champion when Red Bull used to throw their drivers into the British Championship. But I guess now it's more relevant to race on the Formula 1 circuits that they will progress through to, and that's maybe why the British Championship has fallen down the last couple of years.
Roberto Mehi's car still missing from the grid. We know not why, but there is a gap on the inside of the second row. Now, whether it's that the car has missed the pit opening or not, or whether it's got a drama, can't tell you, but Roberto Mehi is not there, so we are 1 down from what we were anticipating, which is a shame, because Roberto Mehi, former DTM Mercedes racer who's been driving this year in Formula Renault 3.5, is a very capable peddler, so it's a shame that he's not on the grid, and that potentially now gives Sam McLeod an even better chance off the line, doesn't it? Because there's a huge gap ahead of him, and he should be able to gain track position.
And the reason that we have Roberto Mehi this weekend racing in Formula 3 is that he wants to go back to Macau. He wants to go and win the Macau race, as we've seen many a driver do over the last couple of years, and therefore he's trying to prove himself, and he has to qualify as a Formula 3 driver this year and take part in the Formula 3 event, and that is why he was entered this weekend.
And he has, of course, done 2 races, so you could argue that he's ticked that box, and he might not really feel the need to come and do race 3. That could be as simple as that. So the grid is now being cleared. They'll get 1 warming up lap, and then we'll be in business for 30 minutes of racing. That, over the course of the weekend, has translated to 13 laps. We did yesterday have a safety car early on in race 2.
I can see Roberto Mehi, in fact, with shorts on rather than a race suit, so no attempt then to go racing today. He's wandering down the pit lane, chatting away with one of his race engineers in front of both our cameras as well. So no chance we're going to see Roberto Mehi, and as you say, that gives McLeod a much better run into the first corner. He was one of the guys that crashed in race 1, damaging his right front corner. Of course, a safety car, in fact, for 2 laps.
That's right, so the engines now fire up, the grid is cleared, and as soon as the last engineer is off the track, then the signal can be given to release the cars for this final warming up lap to get the temperature into the Cooper tyres, and then we will be in business. Rockingham, Silverstone and Snetterton, the 3 locations that the championship has been to. Spa has been a tradition of the British Championship for many, many years now. It's one that the teams love coming to, and it's relevant for the drivers because it is, of course, still a contemporary Formula 1 venue, the same as racing in Silverstone. Though this year, the championship, to try and boost the entry again and perhaps make it more of a national series, has gone to Rockingham. It's having a return to Thruxton, in fact, next month, where it's not been for quite a few seasons. It's a halcyon days of Formula 3 around Thruxton, but it's dropped off the calendar of late because it's felt to be less relevant. But it'll be a challenge for the teams again. And
that'll be another place where they'll encourage other drivers to come and play. I know that there's a few drivers, such as Harry Tinknell, I think, have already committed to racing at that particular track simply because they love Thruxton.
You have to go a long way to find a driver who doesn't. It's a high-speed circuit. Sean Delisle gets away very slowly. Now, he doesn't fall to the back of the grid, but he bogged down a bit there. There are 1 or 2 stragglers, of course. The Formula 3 clutch is a fairly fine device, isn't it?
And depending on the car as well, they have slightly different ways of getting the cars off the line. Some of them do have a sort of a strange handbrake device, which is almost like a brake on your bicycle, and they'll hold that down. Others don't have it, but the clutch itself, there's no slip, there's no slide. You just literally get off the clutch, the clutch sticks together, and you must have enough revs to make sure that car propels itself off the line, because if it doesn't, it will stall.
Now, a month ago, the FIA Championship was here and produced 3 fantastic slipstreaming races, and the bulk of the overtaking was done on this section because you can benefit from the slipstream, can't you, with a good run out of Eau Rouge up to Les Combes.
But Eau Rouge is one of the trickiest corners on the circuit. This is a real driver's circuit. This is the place where drivers can prove their worth, because just a fraction offline into Eau Rouge will compromise the amount of speed you can carry down to here, which is Les Combes, and it's about a kilometre long straight. So if you are 4 or 5 kilometres slower out of Eau Rouge, then you're going to carry that all the way along the straight. You're going to be slipstreamed, you're going to be overtaken into Les Combes, and then really the middle part of the circuit, the newer part of the circuit, if we look back to the old proper Spa, is not really a place to overtake. There's maybe into the Fagnes chicane. You can see that the fog is still very much hovering around the middle part of the track, and as per usual here at Spa, we've got sun and blue sky on the start-finishing line, but the fog's still lingering in the valley.
Yes, the weather gods have their own way of spicing up the racing at Spa, don't they? It's very, very foggy this morning. Thankfully, it's not now quite as bad as it was. The GT cars have been out already this morning for the Spa 24-hour warm-up session, and there's a busy morning of support races with the local Belgian GT Championship, the European GT4 cars due a race, the Lamborghinis and Formula Renault as well. So for the officials, they've had activity already, they've got plenty more to come, and then just one more race, just a 24-hour race this afternoon to worry about. So through Port, these days sanitised a little bit by all of the extra runoff tarmac on the outside, of course, which is the byproduct of being a Formula 1 circuit these days, but it remains a really challenging corner. Then the short straight up towards the Pif Path, or Methane, and then the run down towards the educational building at campus, the double apex right. Cameron McKinsky, see, going through the double R driver. As I say, he's got work to do, really, hasn't he? This grid based on a driver's best lap time from qualifying, and he struggled a little bit in that qualifying session, so he has left himself with quite a bit of work, but he might be able to gain a few places on that opening lap on the run up the hill.
And certainly with a good clump of cars ahead of him, there'll be a nice slipstream, because every single car ahead of him will create a little bit more of a hole, and so by the time you get to P14, there's a massive hole to sit in, and that's one of the brilliant reasons about Formula 3 racing and why it was so exciting here a couple of weeks ago, and why the first 2 races have been really, really good, because they are able to slipstream and they're able to dive down the inside. The brakes aren't sort of carbon fibre, they're not really high spec, so you're not just literally using them as a button. You still have to brake really, really carefully, get the temperature up into them, and therefore the braking zones are quite long, and that obviously opens up opportunities for overtaking as well.
Now, effectively, we've got 2 races within one, haven't we? Because you've got the 2 FIA spec cars, the Carlin cars of Ed Jones and Sean Delisle, potentially racing against each other, and then those that can score points in the British Championship behind. So I suspect we'll focus largely on third in terms of the overall classification, because that's where the real British Championship race is going to come from. Ed Jones, for this race, out-qualified Sean Delisle by nigh on 0.8 of a second. So of the 2 of them, as he has proved in the FIA Series this year, he is the quicker. He will line up on pole position, and as soon as the last man Kang Ling is there. We'll get ready for race 3 of the weekend for the Cooper Tires British F3 International Series.
And it was Roberto Merri who won both those races in the normal spec cars.
Yes.
So Roberto Merri not on the grid, an opportunity for someone else to fly their flag.
And gain the points accordingly, which is going to be important. So the grid is formed. The drivers then now look towards the lighting gantry, and the pole position man, Ed Jones for Carlin, is ready. That green flag means that everybody is back from the warming up lap and is ready to go. And now, as the lights go red, race 3 for British F3 at Spa is go. Sean Gallal makes a better getaway this time. One bogs down mid-pack, but Ed Jones it is who's going to lead the way on the run up towards La Source for the first time. Gallal goes second. Everybody else funnels through the hairpin for the first time, and now Ed Jones sprints away, heading downhill, and inevitably the first lap sharp elbows come into play and people get forced wide over the curb, exiting the hairpin.
It was a slow start for Sam McLeod in the number 2 car. He was the man that bogged down. Sean Gallal got a great initial getaway, but as soon as he changed up into second gear, the car then bogged down. He dropped back, but now through Eau Rouge, much stronger, and there's slipstream effect, most prevalent in the first lap. All sorts of, side by side and on the grass.
Gallal goes for the lead in the yellow car. Ed Jones on the outside line. Sean Gallal outbreaks him, picks up P1 then, heading into Lincoln. Good move that by Gallal, but it was all a little bit feisty in the mid-pack, wasn't it? Yeah,
just trying to work out who they were. I think they were the 2 Fortec cars, those two there, battling with each other and forcing each other off the circuit.
So Matt Rao, Martin Chow, the drivers getting themselves together, down to the very hazy double right at Bruxelles. And then the road drops downhill back into the sunshine as well as they head through Speaker's Corner, the left-hander, and then down towards Pouhon. So Sean Gallal it is leading the way and in fact getting away from Ed Jones, who's got to be on his toes here, hasn't he, because he's coming under pressure.
Yeah, John Bryant-Messner there in a pre-2012 spec car that's normally raced in the German series, putting him under a lot of pressure. I think John is also racing, or certainly did last year, in the European Championship, so he's got a lot of experience, and side by side still, these 2 Fortec cars.
Rao goes ahead of Chow, they're Fortec, and it is for Fortec that John Bryant-Meisner drives in the FIA Championship. So as the cars work their way then for the first time out of the pit path, then through Campus, heading up towards Blanchimont. First they've got to go through the Paul Frere corner, as it's now named, but Sean Gallal, who's had a bit of a anonymous season on occasions in the FIA Championship, is leading the way, but behind him John Bryant-Meisner then putting himself as the best of those to score points. But this battle is either going to be a great race-long duel or it's going to end in tears, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I'm not sure if Richard Dutton's here this weekend, but he'll certainly be having a few words with these 2 young chargers. Of course, they are teammates, yes, but they're also they're separate budgets. They're racing for themselves, aren't they, really? So yes, you should play the team game and be a bit more cautious around your teammate, but at the same time you still want the best result.
And Matt Rao started on the 5th row, Martin Chow on the 3rd, and as they came over the timing line it was Rao from Chow. So Martin Chow has dropped back a little bit on the opening lap of the race. Cameron Kaminsky that we were talking about has gained 2 places in fact, just getting himself up 1 more place heading into La Source. So race leader Sean Gallal at the end of lap 1, led by 11 tenths from John Bryant-Meisner. And Ed Jones, I think, has got himself back up now into 2nd place. So the battle has switched again for 2nd spot. And Ed Jones now perhaps setting off in pursuit of Sean Gallal.
We're looking at the battle for 9th position between Chang and Nikita. Chang very defensive into the first corner at La Source, and it's compromised him all the way down to here. Fortec side by side again, but this time not a space to get through.
We have indeed had that change now for 2nd spot. So Ed Jones has just done the fastest of anybody in the 1st sector. He's half a second quicker than Gallal, so he's bringing down the gap between 1st and 2nd. It's game on this, isn't it? It's going to build up nicely, I think, for the overall lead battle. John Bryant-Meisner then heads what you might call the British Championship runners, the point scorers. He's in 3rd place overall. Nabil Jeffrey comes next, then it's Rao from Chow, and Indy Donja brings up the rear of that little gaggle for the moment. As downhill then comes number 7, Matt Rao, turns his way through Pouhon, and is he starting to edge away ever so slightly now from Martin Chow. That gap just creeping up maybe a little bit. Another good battle developing here though, because round the outside there tries to go Sam McLeod, and he has done it. He takes the place off Donchian, so that's another spot gained after that poor start by Sam McLeod.
Yeah, started in 5th position, dropped down to 8th spot, but that was a lovely move round the outside of the first part of Piff, or Piff Path, and when he got to the Path bit, he had the inside line. Amazing to find a grip round there, because to me, where the GT cars have been at warm-up, they've really made that bit of circuit very, very dirty. He still found grip to do it.
Now in the first sector, as I say, it was Ed Jones going quicker than Sean Gallile. In the middle sector, Sean Gallile pulls away a little bit more. So their battle now is starting to take up attention. Behind, though, John Bryant Meisner leading Nabil Jeffrey, leading Matt Rao, leading Martin Chow. So those four, third, fourth, fifth and sixth, are the leaders of the British Championship element of the race. The point scorers, as over the line go the two Fortec cars. It is still just Rao from Chow. Sam McLeod is up into 7th overall, which is really 5th in the British point scoring element of the race, and he is hunting down this battle ahead of him.
And because they're fighting ahead of him, it won't be too long before he jumps onto the back. Those two not only creating a nice slipstream for him, but they are very much focused on each other. Again, look at this, so much better through Eau Rouge, and again we're going to have a side-by-side situation with Chow on the outside and Rao on the inside, but Chow now forward with the overlap has put himself in the wrong place, and side-by-side for the lead as well.
Jones had a look, couldn't do it. Heading into Les Cons, what's happening in Fortec land? They're still together. Jeffrey gets sideways ahead and round the outside. Chow gets ahead of Rao there. He's managed to hang on to it going through Les Cons. Behind, India Doncha has got back ahead of Sam McLeod, so that has switched around. It does prove that you can race, you can overtake in a Formula 3 car at the right venue.
And that's surprising, because to me it looked like McLeod had a good gap over the start and finishing line, so must have made a mistake in the first sector, pretty slow through the first sector, and therefore that's put Donche back ahead in that black machine, but it means McLeod will be looking for another way through.
But if you get near enough in that first sector and get towards the slipstream, then that does the rest of the work for you, doesn't it? It sort of drags you back up onto the tail. Maybe that's part of it. And again, the slipstream has worked for Ed Jones because he's done the absolute best first sector. Trouble is, he's dropped off the back in the middle sector here. Third place, John Bryant Meisner is on his own. Fourth is Nabil Jeffrey there. Now fifth behind him, Martin Chow, having got ahead of Matt Rao, is starting to shake off Rao and go after Nabil Jeffrey for second of the point scorers. 72 going through. Nikita Zlobin, the Russian driver, son of Sergei Zlobin, who we saw in Blancpain last year, now Ferrari GT racer. So we have got the leaders working lap 3. 23 minutes of the half-hour race remain as the cars turn their way now up towards Blanchimont and then down towards the bus stop.
And Gallile, the fastest of anyone through the second sector, so was able to really put on a great charge. But look how Jones has pulled him in the final sector. And whilst it was the best ever sector of Sector 3, Jones matched and went better than him by 3/10, and they're locked together again. Now Jones will look for a really good run through Eau Rouge and try and get that slipstream again. And, oh, they've swallowed up Nabil Jeffrey. So the two Fortec cars snapping at Jeffrey's heels.
So Chow gets through, Rao will challenge on the run down the hill. If they can get past him, they might be able to do something about John Bryant Meisner before the end, mightn't they? So at the moment, you've got 57, which is Martin Chow ahead of Nabil Jeffrey. Then Matt Rao next up, the former Formula 4 racer. The three of them absolutely nose to tail. Now, can Jeffrey fight back, or is he going to get mugged? He's going to get mugged, isn't he? Rao pulls out of the draft. Has he gone too soon, though? There he has. Jeffrey attacks one side. Rao switches sides. Thankfully, they avoid banging wheels. And once again, it's the Fortec cars overlapping with Jeffrey a bit blocked in there.
Well, Jeffrey would have had the slipstream, but it seemed that the run was much better from the 5 car, and therefore he has got through. Both Fortecs move up a place. Bit of defensive work going on through Les Cons just to make sure that Nabil Jeffrey can't snap back at him, and still sits on the inside line as they head down into Brussels.
And then Indy Doncha is closing up a little bit as well, and behind is Sam McLeod, who has not really made the progress in this race that I thought he might.
Well, exactly. He started in 5th position, had the pace to be up there, but made that bad start. And I think, you know, he's shown a little bit of pace going around the outside at Le Fang, but then having dropped back, you sort of then equalise the pace with the guy in front of you. You find yourself driving to the cars around you rather than at your own pace.
As you say, he was ahead of Doncha, then dropped back again, and he struggled to retaliate. He's close again, heading through the pith path. The cars now working their way down towards campus. Sean Gallile this time doing the best of anybody in the middle sector. There is Sam McLeod for the Carlin team. Quick Carter raced in Formula Ford 1600. He had a spell in Formula Renault. He's raced in the most recent version of Formula Ford, the EcoBoost engine cars, and then also had a spell in the Formula Renault North European Cup, the NEC. So he's got lots of single-seater experience, largely slicks and wings as well. He knows a bit about Spa, and he's closing back up, isn't he, onto the tail of Indy Doncha as they come down towards the bus stop. Nabil Jeffrey staying ahead for the moment of the pair of them. Is McLeod going to be able to make a move? Not there.
Yeah, it's a good place to overtake, but he just wasn't close enough, and it's also a very easy place to defend. You can easily put your car on the inside line there, and because it's a chicane, you really do need to jam it down the inside, do almost a late brake dive, block the apex, and therefore have the line for the second part of the chicane. If you don't, then it just won't work.
So out of the hairpin, down from La Source, past the endurance pits, the old pits, and then into Eau Rouge. And there, looking further down the order, number 1, which is Peter Lee, is trying to find a way now up and past the double R car of Andy Chang, the Macanese driver, fending him off at the moment. So you've got this good battle between two different teams, and I think given the pace uphill and the slipstream, Peter Lee, number 1, is going to make the move. Yes, he goes to the outside line, heading up the Camel Straight. Now, has he got the move done? Yes, he has. You can see there that halfway up the straight, virtually, Andy Chang had to give way and slot back in, and he can't retaliate heading into the braking zone for the corner. And
one thing you can do with that little kink in the straight, the 1 kilometre straight there, is position your car in a way that the overtaking car actually has to back off. And as soon as you back off, you ruin all of that momentum that you've taken up through Eau Rouge, and that is the way to defend along there. Not to sit on the inside line into Le Con, but actually do something mid-straight to try and compromise the speed down the end of the straight.
Down to Pouhon then, counts 57, which is Martin Chow. And behind him, Matt Rao, who was ahead early on, has now not only lost the place, but he's also lost a bit of time, partly by being stuck behind Nabil Jeffrey, who's now fallen back into 6th place. And I think he's going to drop further, isn't he? Because Jeffrey now has got Danger and also Sam McLeod getting onto the back of him. This 3-way battle, as we've done the first third of the race now, is starting to build up quite nicely.
Surprising that Jeffrey has just really dropped back on pace. It's his best time at 2:19.2, but he is one of the few drivers that is not improving. In fact, his last lap at 2:20, so well off his ultimate pace, whereas the guys at the front are still improving.
Sam McLeod there, given a squeeze, bounced wide over the curb. Lucky to get away with that, but Indy Johnshaw making that car very wide indeed. Sam McLeod lucky to get away with that. The car back on track. He's only lost a length as well, but as they come to the bus stop, that was his real frightener. Into the braking zone they come, right and then left, up past the pits, and then down to La Source once again. Sean Galile still leads outright by 3/10. This was McLeod's moment. He went to the outside. He did so much get a squeeze, there just wasn't really a gap for him, but he kept on coming. So in fairness to Indy Danger, he didn't exactly change line, did he? He stood where he was, but Sam McLeod's trajectory was going to take him wide, and he kept his foot in.
Ed Jones has managed to close that gap down again and has carried a lot more speed through Eau Rouge. He's going to be challenging. There was 0.3 of a second between the two as they went over the line, and now rubbing wheels over the straight. And again, these two are teammates. They may not be in the same coloured car, but they're two Carlin cars, and Jones goes back ahead of Galil despite having to take to the grass.
Yeah, can I just question your description of the word mate here, because I think there might be a falling out after that. But Ed Jones, fair play, was very brave, wasn't he? He was the man that got the squeeze towards the grass, but he kept his foot in, he kept on coming, and he has taken over the lead. So now Sean Galile drops to second. Ed Jones, this is how he did it, goes to the outside, and the gap soon disappears. That was a bit touch and go, that, wasn't it?
Well, if Sean Galile had allowed his car to go where it was supposed to go, rather than twitching to the inside, then that would have been a fair move. But the fact he was going to defend on the inside, then saw Jones going to the outside, so then came across the circuit, and Jones was already there.
Good, brave stuff by Ed Jones. As I said before the race started, he's been on the sidelines for the last couple of months after this back-jarring crash, or a couple of crashes, in fact, he had at Pau in the street circuit there in May, and this will do his confidence a power of good, because it's been hard work this year in the FIA Championship, and he's just proved there that he's got good racecraft. As McLeod has a look to get past Danger, but he can't do it, heading into the piff path. And now look, because Danger's gone defensive, they've lost a real chunk of time to Nabil Jeffrey.
We're talking about confidence. That's one of the most important things as a motor racing driver, and that is why some of these guys are here this weekend. Sean Galile here to almost trophy hunt. It's a bad way of putting it, but as soon as you win a race, you can go into the next race, despite the competition being completely different, with a completely different mindset, knowing that you're able to get on that top step of the podium, the better confidence, better driving therefore, and that in theory will improve, and that's something that Trevor Carlin has done a lot with his drivers, is get them in a position where they have felt like winning the race.
Sam McLeod feels like gaining a place. He's on the outside line of the bus stop. Can he get the outside for part one and the inside for part two? No, he can't. Dodger ran him wide. Yeah,
it's never going to work from the outside line. You have to be on the inside there, and then you do exactly what the guy did in front. Run him off the road.
So for the moment, Indy Doncher then hangs onto the place as the cars work their way over the timing line. The gap between them was half a second when they came over the timing line, but of course it was much, much less than that when they went into the corner. Donge driving for the Motorpark Academy team. He's driven in the ADAC Formula Masters Championship in 1600 engine Formula Renault, and now in Formula 3 in this British and indeed German F3 Cup. So again, he's got lots of single-seater knowledge, hasn't he?
Well, it's very important. This is the combative type of driving that we're seeing here, the way that the cars are moving around, the speed of the track as well. This is why Spa is such a good learning ground, because you do have to defend, attack, and have a real sense of knowing exactly what you need to do to make a pass. And as you can see, down the Kemmel Straight even, there are a sometimes difficult way of passing. These two Fortec cars are backed together again, and I think that's changed hands. I think Rao is now ahead of Chow again.
Go along with that, yes, so their private battle continues. Of course, it's good to watch, but it's not helping them gain places overall, because they keep delaying themselves by squabbling, don't they? Down through Pouan, you're quite right. This is Rao back ahead of Chow. So Matt Rao, single-seater racer in the UK, Formula Ford, Formula Renault, moving to Formula 3 this year and learning about a more powerful type of single-seater racing car. He goes now through the Piff-Paff. See how dusty it is offline. You get hung out to drive there, you're going to know about it. And that's going to be a problem for GT drivers later on in the day, isn't it, if they have to go offline to do any overtaking there. Meantime, Ed Jones leads Sean Gallar. The gap outright is creeping up. John Bright Meisner is the leading driver heading for points in the British Championship, ahead at the moment of Rao, Chow and then Nabil Jeffrey.
Yeah, and he's having a bit of a lonely race, isn't he, in third position? He hasn't had anyone to play with. He's got a 7-second gap to the leaders, and then he's got a 5-second advantage ahead of the Fortec 2. So a very quiet sort of race and a nice relaxing one. But sometimes you want someone to play with just to have a bit of fun.
Well, the two race leaders have just gone over the timing line. That gives you an idea of the performance gain the FIA spec engines have. It's about 2 seconds a lap. So you multiply that over the race distance and they're going to go storming away. We've done 7 laps. 13, 14 is what we're aiming for. 13 I think is what we're going to get, given how much time remains in the race. So John Bright Meisner 3rd, Matt Rao 4th, Martin Chow 5th, Nabil Jeffrey is in 6th place, 7th is Indy Donge, 8th is Sam McLeod, 9th is Peter Lee, and in 10th place Andy Chang, now ahead of Nikita Zlobin. Cameron McKinsky still only 12th, disappointing that. I thought he would have done much, much better. Kang Lim still stuck at the back of the field.
Once again, Chow better run through Eau Rouge, but is he going to be close enough? This is where he'll pick up the slipstream this time. In fact, he's got a good gap, so he can now dive down the inside here at Les Combes, and that is going to make stick. So back in a 4th position. No! Wow! Turns across the bows, and suddenly side by side they still are. It is 7 still ahead of 57, so Rao holds on, but that was a pretty late move to turn across the bows of your teammate when it looked like Chow had the inside line.
Yes, you can imagine the guys on the Fortec pit wall haven't been able to breathe out for about 20 minutes because this has been very leery indeed. I have a feeling Richard Dutton's away racing in historic touring cars at Silverstone this weekend, and that might be the best place for him, because if he sees all of this, it would get his heart rate going a bit. So down through Pouan they come. Rao versus Chow, 2 of them still tied together, and John Bright Meisner is very nearly 6 seconds up the road. So unless he has a drama, they're not going to get anywhere near him, are they?
No, exactly, and he, as I say, having a very lonely race, but incredibly good to see that a pre-2012 spec car still able to compete with the more modern spec. There is some sort of performance ballast to allow them to be competitive, but it's good, and that is one of the great things about the British Championship, is allowing those older spec cars that would otherwise be just gathering dust to come out, be used in a British Championship.
And it's still training drivers about working with this type of single-seater, working with the engineers as well to get the best out of it. So it is all still ticking the boxes for what Formula 3 is meant to be, which is a driver training category. Down to the bus stop they come then. This is for effectively 2nd in the British Championship. Ignore for the moment the 2 Carlin cars from the FIA Championship with their different spec out front. Over the line, John Bright Meisner, that last lap that he did was a 2:18.8, and then a 2:17.7 I should say. Rao does a 2:18.8, a 2:19 from Chow. In other words, that gap's going up. Sam McLeod has a look on the inside. That was a bit late, but he's going to have a go, and they almost interlock wheels, and Donge has no option but to run wide. Otherwise there was going to be contact, but I think he might have even hung on to the place.
Yeah, if you run really, really wide there, you are able to keep the momentum through the corner, and therefore he sort of gains an advantage by running and allowing the car to travel more distance. It's backed both of those 2 cars up though, with the number 1 machine now picking up a double slipstream. It's going to be very, very interesting going to Les Combes.
3 wide, they head up the hill. In the middle of it all is Sam McLeod. To his left is Peter Lee, who he gets ahead of, or stays ahead of, and up the inside tries to go Donja, but McLeod has done it round the outside. That was good stuff.
Yeah, he came from a long way back into La Source, and I think that almost surprised Donje, but then had the momentum down the hill into Eau Rouge, carried that through Eau Rouge, had a bit of a slipstream, was able to defend as well, and finally has made it stick. Now what he needs to do is get away. Yeah,
indeed so, and he's being helped in doing that because Donje, as you suggest, he's now having to defend from Peter Lee. So straight away McLeod drives off into the distance. Now is he going to be able to gain anything else out of this? Nabil Jeffrey is up the road, but if he can concentrate on his own race, he might have a chance of getting up there. Doesn't have to worry about his mirrors anymore, does he, as the cars turn their way. This is the replay at La Source. He did seem to make that move late, Sam McLeod, and it wasn't really on, was he? He was never fully alongside, and of course by running out wide, so Indy Donje is able to keep his foot nailed to the boards, power out of the corner ahead still.
Yeah, and I don't think even Sam thought that was particularly on, did he? The way that the car sort of crept into the corner, he wasn't completely committed to that.
No, you're right.
Move.
Absolutely right. He didn't look as though he believed in that 100%. So the 2 race leaders long gone through the bus stop. Then John Bryant Meisden, who is equally out on his own in the performance racing car. Robbie Izazada, who owns that team, himself a former Formula 3 racer. And then this is the Fortec fight. Rao versus Chow. And Chow has come back at him, hasn't he? Even though they've been trading places, now you've got Chow right back onto the tail once again. He's not had a victory this year, Martin Chow, but he was second in the first 7 races of the season, which was ultra consistent. Over the timing line, down towards La Source once again. The gap between them half a second when they came over the line, and now we've only got 9 more minutes of the race to go.
And at the moment, of course, he lies in second position because although he is 4th on the road, those first 2 cars don't score points. So it could well be another consistent drive to the championship positions. And with John Bryant Meisler not competing in the full championship, that will give him an advantage. It's Rao ahead of Chow in the championship at the moment. And again, they go side by side up the Kemmel Straight.
And so Chow to the outside line, and he makes the move and he gets the place. That's 4th overall, but back at him comes Matt Rao on the inside and he retakes the place. Fantastic racing, and again it just proves that that section of the circuit where you can slipstream is really ideal for Formula 3.
It's so long that he was able to get back into the slipstream, feel the boost of that slipstream, the hole, and it's almost like pressing an overboost button. Yeah. The car then will continue to accelerate, found himself closing back up, so had no choice but to put the car to the inside to make that move.
And now he starts to pull away once again, so it's a case of, as you were really, it's like that move never happened. Matt Rao is still ahead.
Now Sam McLeod has got his head down. He's pulled away from the battle behind him and he's tucked under the rear wing of Nabil Jeffrey through Pouant. No real place to overtake here, just a place to make take away any advantage that the guys have got in front. Had a look down the inside Lafani. He went round, remember, the outside here, which was a pretty impressive move early on in the race. Decides against it this time and will line himself up either for a pass into the bus stop chicane, or he'll just follow through and get it done further on. But Jeffrey making a mistake there through Campus. He heard the car sliding, and therefore the pass could be done even before we get to the next braking zone.
Nose to tail they run then, the 2 of them coming up towards the Paul Frere. Sam McLeod tries the outside line, Nabil Jeffrey defends then. This is the 6th and 7th overall as the cars now come towards Blanchimont. Can McLeod fire it up the inside heading into the bus stop? I suspect that line is going to be covered, isn't it?
Well, it has to be covered because there's no other option for Nabil Jeffrey, but Sam tried to go all the way around the outside. Whoa! Second move where he's managed to squeeze the guy on the inside of him and get round the outside into the chicane. And a lovely move from Sam McLeod and a little bit of contact. Hopefully no damage to that rear wheel that made some sort of contact with the front wing of Nabil Jeffrey.
I had visions of that ending in tears, but they both drove well. That was good, hard, committed racing, wasn't it? So Nabil Jeffrey gave him as little room as he could possibly justify, but Sam McLeod kept on coming round the outside, and of course while they've been squabbling like that, Indy Donja has bought back into it, hasn't he? He's almost close enough to attack Jeffrey now on the way up the hill, but Nabil Jeffrey can retaliate against Sam McLeod.
Well, of course, because having made that move into the chicane, he's now just provided a slipstream all the way up the Kemmel Straight, down into Eau Rouge, now back up the Kemmel Straight into Les Com, and it's going to be 3 wide.
But McLaren hangs on to the place, and Doncher gets around. Jeffrey runs really wide up to the curb, but he's done it. He goes through and gains 7th place now. So Indy Doncher goes through. Nabil Jeffrey drops back 1 spot and has to defend all of a sudden from Peter Lee. So it's not been a great lap, has it, for Nabil Jeffrey?
And this is where he's not particularly strong through this middle section of the lap. Sector 2 is where he's losing all his time, and he heard and saw the car getting a little bit sideways in the later part of it. He's just not strong enough. Maybe he's overcooked his Cooper tyres, but he hasn't got the grip that he once had at the start of this race, and that's why he's falling back. The Cooper tyres, very different to manage than the tyres they use in the European Formula 3 Championship, so some of the drivers struggling to get their head around the different ways of driving these tyres. But of course, for the guys that have been racing in the full championship, it shouldn't be a problem, like Nabil Jeffrey. Now, so Peter Lee in the one machine needs to be nice and tidy through here. Try and get a nice exit out of Paul Frere and towards Blanchimont, and then into the chicane to potentially line himself up for a move into La Source, or then got to think 2 kilometres ahead into Le Combe. But at the moment, not close enough. Not even using all the road as they go through the flat-out Blanchimont.
Lee has a look to the inside, but too far back really to make that a serious move. 4.5 minutes remain. We're going to get about 2 more laps out of this race, aren't we?
Of course, if you do that and the guy in front is looking in the wrong mirror, suddenly he'll think that you are down the inside of him, and potentially he then misses his braking zone. So it is worth trying to distract the driver ahead just by moving around in his wing mirrors at the braking point, so he misses that braking point, especially into the chicane where it is such a heavy braking zone, and just a couple of metres out you could then go deep, and it gives you an opportunity to overtake into La Source.
So down towards Eau Rouge comes Sam McLeod, who now is into the top 6, but it's taken him a long time to get there, and so perhaps he'll struggle to get any further progress this in effectively now a lap and a half or so still to go. Ed Jones looks like he's going to do 3 out of 3 this weekend in terms of pure race wins, not scoring points however. John Bryant Meisner will score a victory after 2 second places in terms of points this weekend, and lower down still there are battles to be resolved, aren't there, because there, look, Andy Chang is under pressure from Nikita Zlobin. Chang in the double R car, Zlobin for ADM Motorsport. In fact, that gap widens a little bit as they come out of Le Combe, but that is for 10th and 11th places.
And Nikita running in the SMP colours that have sort of dominated motorsport in all forms and different categories, with the influx of Russian drivers into the European Championships this year. And it's really nice to see such a great support, and you know, some of them are actually fantastic drivers and will progress. We'll see quite a few of them in the GT race in 24 Hours at Spa. They have just 1 car SMP racing, but there were 3 or 4 at the Le Mans 24 Hours, and there is a single-seater team as well. Even in Indy cars, we've got an SMP machine for Michael Aleshin.
Yes, SMP Racing is one of Boris Rottenberg's businesses, as is the SMP Bank. There was no shortage of money there. And Boris Rottenberg himself, a former judo sparring partner of Vladimir Putin. So he's well connected. And Nikita Zlobin running in the SMP colours, as Ben rightly says. Now, Nabil Jeffrey is under attack, isn't he, here? Because once again, on his tail is Peter Lee as the cars work their way up towards the bus stop, and Lee this time should be able to have a go.
If there's space on the inside line, or he could try and replicate his teammate and go all the way around the outside. He goes to the outside line, but isn't close enough, not alongside enough. In fact, you need to be more than alongside to go around the outside of the chicane. You need to almost have the whole car ahead. But he can now plan, get a better exit out of the chicane, maybe go into the braking zone in La Source, or carry more speed through La Source, through Eau Rouge, and then get it done into Le Combe. It's a real thinking man's circuit, this, and that is why Spa is so popular and so well respected amongst all forms of motorsport.
1 minute and 40 seconds on the clock. The leaders working their way down towards Pouhon at the moment. I think they're going to squeeze 1 more lap out of this race. In fact, such is the pace of them in race 3 of the weekend. It looks as though it's going to be John Bryant Meisner for 3rd place, because although he's got Matt Rao behind him, the gap has gone up rather than coming down. Nikita Zlobin is on the tail then here of Andy Chang. Is he going to make a move? He tries the outside line as they head up towards Le Combe. On the outside line then is the Russian driver, and Zlobin will brake late, and he does gain the place, defends as he comes into Le Combe, but through he has gone. Nikita Zlobin then goes up into 10th place. His father, of course, still races and did briefly test a Formula 1 car. Sergei Zlobin, the only racing driver I can think of to have survived a car bomb blast. If there are any more, then answers on a postcard. But Nikita Zlobin then gains 1 spot, and although he's a long way back in real terms from the race leaders, the weekend has been useful for him because it's more experience, more mileage, and it's all adding to his overall enhancement as a driver. John Meisner, meantime, a really lonely race.
But in terms of championship points, very important.
Indeed.
Maybe not necessarily for the full championship, as he's not competing in all the races. And therefore, the important battle, in fact, is that Fortec battle between Rao and Chow.
But given that John Meisner has struggled in the FIA Championship, and he comes here and takes potentially 2 seconds and then a win, you could think that he might change his focus a little bit, because this might be something he can put on his CV at the end of the year as a better statistic than struggling in the FIA Series.
And before he came to the FIA Series, he absolutely dominated the German F3.
Indeed, right, yes.
So there is something about, potentially, the tyre that he just finds very difficult to drive with.
Now, we're not done yet, are we? The leaders have started their final lap. Fortec's duel continues. It's down to 0.3 of a second. It is Rao ahead of Chow as they come over the line. And is Chow going to be able to have a go at the inside? Not there, he's not.
No, but if he was ahead through La Source, then that would give him a slipstream disadvantage into Le Com, so better to sit behind. And then there's only really one more overtaking opportunity. They go nose to tail through Eau Rouge. The important thing is to carry more momentum from Chow up through Eau Rouge, and already he's up right on the gearbox of Rao ahead of him. Pulls to the outside line though, and they're going to go side by side into Le Com. Can he make this move stick? He needs to slightly start to edge his teammate across, but he does get through. Now he defends, a lovely move. Oh, Rao around the outside.
Fantastic. Proper Formula 3 Spa move. That wasn't it? Absolutely fantastic. It's not just Esteban Ocon that can be brave, or Max Verstappen that can be brave going into that section of the circuit. So Rao, for the second time, having lost the place, gains it back, and Chow makes a mistake going into Brazil. You saw him lock up, he slithers out wide, and that's torn it now. That's
it. And to be fair, with that last move from Rao, he really deserves to take the victory in this little inter-team battle, because that was lovely. Had the disadvantage all the way up the Kennel Straight, lost the place, but was able to then brave it out round the outside. Here it is again. Look, he's on the inside at that point, now switches to the outside line, later on the brakes, and able to squeeze his teammate. A little bit of respect there, surely, and able to take the place back. So 13 cars started, but we have had a pretty decent race, haven't we? It may not be a massive entry these days, but British F3 is on the up once again, and Ed Jones is going to score his 3rd victory of the weekend. Over the line then comes Ed Jones, 3 out of 3, and that is the way to return to single-seater racing for Carlin Motorsport. A nice battle with his teammate Sean Galal this time through, and he completes a triple. But for points, the most important person is John Brian Messner, who is a long way back, in fact, some 6 or 7 seconds. Here's the battle for second position in points, Fortec versus Fortec, and Rao has done a really lovely job in that last lap to take second position. 20 seconds the gap between the front two and John Brian Meissner in the end. Rao gets second and Chow gets third. And the rest come pouring over the timing line. So Brian Meissner, Rao and Chow, 3rd, 4th and 5th overall. The battle between Nabil Jeffrey and behind him Peter Lee ends with Nabil Jeffrey fending him off. He finishes 8th overall, and Peter Lee comes home for 9th place. 10th is going to be just Nikita Zlobin, but the Russian driver only a 5th of a second ahead at the very end of Andy Chang, and they came nose to tail over the timing line. And then 34, which is Cameron McKinsky, heading up towards the line. Very, very frustrating race that from Cameron. He's sideways as he gets the power down, but having struggled in qualifying, he struggled come the race as well. I really did think there was going to be some progress up through the order, but even though he gained 1 spot early on, he lost that back again. So big, big frustration for him. So Ed Jones it is then who takes the win by just over a second from his Carlin teammate Sean Galal. John Brian Meissner finishes in 3rd place, and as we've been saying during the course of the race, is the leading point scorer, because his car is in proper, if you like, British F3 spec. Matt Rao finishing in 4th place, and Martin Chow 5th, ahead of Sam McLeod, who did make progress. It took him a few laps to get into his stride, but once he was making progress, he got himself up into the top 6, and in real terms that's 4th as far as points are concerned. Brands Hatch and then Thruxton and Donington remain on the calendar for the end of the British F3 season. And let's have a look back at some of the highlights of the 3rd race of the weekend, starting with Ed Jones on pole position.
Sean Galal alongside him as the cars, having got some warmth into the tyres, were unleashed. Sam McLeod bogged down, even though there was a big gap ahead of him with the non-starting Roberto Mehi off the grid. Instead of capitalising on that, he bogged down and lost ground as the cars worked their way into La Source for the first time. It was Sean Galal who had the advantage as Rao and Chow started their duel, running each other up towards the grass. Sam McLeod had a go around the outside of Indy Donche, and then the Fortec car started to make progress up ahead of Nabil Jaffrey. Rao and Chow working their way through to the front, and Jaffrey starting to drop down the order. McLeod tried to go around the outside of Donche, but there just was not room coming out of the Cours Paul Frère. Then for the race lead, Ed Jones made his move. He got squeezed towards the grass as well. He kept his foot in and powered past with the benefit of the toe to get himself up past Sean Galal. And once ahead, he continued to build the advantage to win by a second. So Ed Jones and Sean Galal, regulars in the FIA F3 European Championship, which goes to the Red Bull Ring next weekend. They take the top 2 places in the classification. But John Bryant Meisner, 14 laps of racing done, is the man who will take maximum British points ahead of Matt Rao and then Martin Chow. Sam McLeod comes next ahead of Indy Donche, then Nabil Jaffrey, Peter Lee, Nikita Zlobin, Andy Chang, and then Kang Lim to round out the top 12. Cameron McKinsky comes home in 13th place, and the one that never made it onto the grid, Roberto Mehi, who has done what he needs to do by doing 2 races this weekend to prove to the organisers of the Macau Grand Prix that he has been an F3 racer, and therefore he's in. He's ticked all those relevant boxes. Cameron McKinsky, the man who brought up the rear of the field, the former Formula Ford racer. So the drivers will make their way shortly up to the podium. And for Ed Jones, the celebrations can continue. He will have done his confidence a huge, huge power of good this weekend. The last time he was in an F3 car, it ended badly with 2 sizable shunts into the barriers at the unforgiving but glorious French street circuit of Pau in the FIA Championship races there. But here he has fought back and underlined that the racecraft has not gone missing, that he still knows how to drive a Formula 3 car, and to take 3 race victories, that will do his confidence good as he steps back into the bear pit of the European Championship in a week's time. A huge crowd at Spa. It's getting busier and busier all the time as the fans, many of them, make a whole weekend out of this, fill the campsites. The GT fans, of course, getting themselves prepared for 24 hours of racing that comes up later on in the day. The drivers, in the meantime, go to the podium, with Ed Jones then celebrating the victory. John Bryant Meisner's 2 second places and that effective race win, vaulting him up in the championship. It's the first weekend he's done within British Formula 3, and let's hope that John can be persuaded to take part, budget permitting, in a few more races. He's been driving for Fortec in the FIA Championship. The team had to miss the last races in Moscow because he was short of budget. Mitch Gilbert, his European Championship teammate, I think has run out of money altogether and therefore has looked towards GP3. So it may be that circumstances force a change of direction for John Bryant Meisner. But here at the glorious Spa-Francorchamps, the British F3 International Series has once again provided plenty of drama, plenty of talking points, and it's good that the championship numerically has been a little bit stronger this weekend, and some great racing we have enjoyed. So as the drivers head to the podium, Ed Jones along with Sean Galal for the top 2 places, John Bryant Meisner third, and who comes out on top in the British Championship for those that can score the points. And with the championship being led into that race by Matt Rao, his battle with Martin Chow, an important one. Sam McLeod third, but being outscored by them. It was a point between Rao and Chow, another point back to Sam McLeod, but those margins I think would have increased over the course of that race. But from Spa, in the sunshine, Ed Jones takes victory in all 3 British F3 races.
le pilote des Émirats Arabes Unis qui vient de Dubaï pour exactement dire en toute son hymne national. Félicitations, congratulations to Ed Jones. We will welcome Brian Davis representing Cooper Tires Motorsport, and he will hand out the trophy to the second classified driver, ladies and gentlemen, Sean Gellel. And you can put your hands together. Hein? Vous pouvez les applaudir évidemment. And the winner is Ed Jones. So, such a big race and a nice race.
I'm sexy and I know it.
Photo souvenir évidemment, et Jones qui pourra repartir plus que ravi de son week-end en Belgique. La suite donc avec le podium désormais du championnat britannique de Formule 3, ce qui marquait. Écoutez, John Messner, on va donc écouter l'hymne national suédois. Brian Davis, once again, representing Cooper Tires. Représentant les pneumatiques Cooper, partenaire évidemment depuis longtemps d'ailleurs de ce championnat britannique de Formule 3. C'est Brian Davis, il va remettre les trophées à Martin Kao 3e, à Matra au 2e et à John Brian Messner, le Suédois vainqueur. Et puis on va également accueillir Lorraine Granville. Elle est la coordinatrice des équipes et elle va remettre le Mobile Service Center Master of the Weekend Award, donc la récompense pour une belle performance sur le week-end.
Round 9 of the Formula Renault 2-litre Northern European Cup is ready for action here at Spa-Francorchamps. It's a 25-minute race. It's the second of 2 races here of the weekend. And yesterday we had a victory for Kevin Jurg. He is the man on pole position for this second race. And he is also something of a spoilsport, because yesterday he became the first man to win twice this season, and that rather spoilt the pattern of what had been an absolutely wide open season of having 7 races and 7 different winners. He's the only person therefore to have done this double, and he starts on pole position for Josef Kaufmann Racing. The championship situation though on the results of yesterday's race is very close indeed, because the man that was second in yesterday's race, Ben Barnicoat, the Brit in the Racing Steps Foundation colours, is now only 1 point ahead of the Dutchman Stein Schothorst, and then 12 points back is the second year Kaufman driver Louis Delatraz. And Delatraz here, I think he's going to be eager to get himself up from 4th on the grid and try and bag some points. Callan O'Keefe yesterday, there you're looking at him, went off on the first lap of the race. There was a bit of touching of wheels and he came off worst and exited stage left. So he also, the Lotus Junior driver, needs a haul of points. He's not had a win yet, despite the fact that Callan O'Keefe has had 2 second places, one at Silverstone, one at Hockenheim. But he's going to be a man to watch as well. And the grid, which is 25 cars strong, is released now onto the warming up lap. This championship, which has been very, very strong all season, delivers some great racing. And with the wins having gone the way of Louis Delatraz at Monza, Kevin Jorg won the second race there. Levin Amveg, who's absent this weekend, won at Silverstone. Seb Morris, British driver, he was also a Silverstone winner. He starts on the 4th row. Seb Morris will be one to watch, I think. Gustav Malia, he was a Hockenheim winner, so also was Ben Barnicoat, and Aurélien Panis